I have so many interesting things to say, Shaun, and you're just depriving everybody from them.
People praise me every week for muting us both at the start of the song. What can I say?
I think you need to reconsider it.
Well, welcome to the Double Deuce times 2, eh? Mashup 44. Brought to you
times 2.
That's right. And I don't know if Drew McKay, when he was like signing on, knew he was going to get the Double Deuce, but he's getting the Double Deuce times 2 this week. In his final installment, the godfather of the idea of trying to get small businesses in line with what we're doing. And I believe we're under 5 weeks left available, twos. And that comes from this man. So this is his last week. So I wish I had a flag or something, some horns to blare for him, because pretty cool of AMC Electrical to Rocky Mountain House to step up for us for the first month.
Yep. You definitely have our gratitude for that. And if you're looking for a job and you want to move to a place that, I mean, it's God's country as much as some place with a bunch of stupid mountains is. I mean, think of all the extra farmland they could have if they just chopped them down. You're just missing out on so much wheat, barley, and canola by having those stupid fucking things there. But fair enough, I guess, if that's what you're into.
Well, here's a little bit from AMC. They started back in 2005. He is a small town Sass kid. Moved out to Rocky Mountain House, which, as Two's alluded to, is beautiful country. I finally got to see it firsthand for myself. He's looking for hardworking individuals that understand the oil and gas industry isn't a guaranteed paycheck. It's ups and downs. There's no free lunch, but if you work hard enough and make yourself a valuable asset by always expanding your skill set, you'll never be out of work. And ideally, these people would love freedom, enjoy the outdoors, and possess a ticket in instrumentation or electrical, or at least be started down the apprenticeship path. And the info is in the show notes. And once again, the fifth booster.
Maybe not for you. I mean, I saw someone on Twitter the other day talking about how they're waiting to get their sixth one. You're like, why even wait at this point? Just fill yourself right up. Get absolutely bloated.
Just stick it in the vein.
Yeah, just mainline it. Like, heat it up in a spoon and
oh man. Of course, I haven't paid for this, and Twos is going to make you know that. But the SMP presents. Featuring Topic Legacy Media coming to Edmonton, featuring Kid Carson, Wayne Peters, Kim Sims, Byron Christopher. That's March 18th. Here's some cool stuff, though, that I'm sure Twos will be on board with. There's some cool people going to be at that show, including 222 Minutes. You're going to be in attendance. A guy who's graced the Mashup, Marty Up North, is going to be in attendance. Here's a name for you that's going to be in attendance that you don't know yet. Tamara Leach is going to be in attendance.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's going to be more of that coming out on who's coming that weekend and things like that. But I thought, geez, for the Mashup, why not break that? I've been talking with Tamara, and she's gonna make the tour out. So
that's gonna be. I'm excited. Way to just spring this on me, Shaun. But that is awesome news.
Isn't that what Twos always does to me, folks? I feel like it is. It's nice to see his tongue a little bit tied,
I'm going to be a little bit starstruck.
Now for the Tuesday mashup itself, if you're like, man, I want to get involved here. I've got one lady in the wing, waiting in the wings. When I get back, we're recording this for all you live stream folks. Today we're a throwback, and So I think there's 5 weeks left, soon to be less than that. So if you're interested, shoot me a text. The phone number's in the show notes, and we can get you hooked up with one of the final weeks of 2023. I never thought I'd be saying that a month after we initially had the idea come from Mr. Drew McKay and AMC Electrical. So a wild, wild start to the year.
Yes.
Now I'm going to turn the stinking horn down to 29 this week. I've had a couple 28. All right, 28. Here we go. Okay. Timer set 43:43. I feel like Twos is going to go on a roll this week. I could be wrong.
That's not the kind of thing Twos would ever do.
Liberal Party, like everything else made in China, is garbage. And here you go. Okay. China, we know, man, this has been a giant story. But here we go. We'll try and encapsulate some of it. China, we know, has interfered in elections. I don't know.
Encapsulate.
Thank you. Thank you for my spell correct on the Tuesday mashup, folks. China, we know, has interfered in elections in 2019 and 2021. Last week, the Globe and Mail reported that in 2021, China employed a sophisticated strategy to attempt to influence the election by having a liberal minority returned and some conservative MPs defeated. The source for the story was documents from CSIS. According to the sources, the candidate in question was Han Dong, then former Ontario MPP, who the Canadian Security Intelligence Service had started tracking in 2019. And National Security also alleged that Dong, now the sitting MP reelected in 21, is one of the at least 11 Toronto area riding candidates allegedly supported by Beijing in the 2019 contest. Sources say the service also believes Dong is a witting affiliate in China's election interference networks. It goes on to say a whole lot. Here's a quote. Chinese international students were also transported in to support the same candidate. The report says the students were given letters that provided them an address in the specific riding, thereby enabling them to participate in the nomination vote. The students were also told by the PRC consulate to support the specific candidate if they wanted to maintain their student visas. CSIS reported intelligence indicated that this candidate is very close and receives support from the PRC consulate. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I can keep
it. Absolutely does. So their basic strategy was if they can get a Chinese candidate to win the Liberal nomination in a riding where the Liberals are a shoo-in, then it's just as good as
well, just think here at home, folks. I'm thinking the Conservatives in the rural parts of all Alberta are a shoo-in. It's almost a shoo-in.
Yeah, so if you win, is the same riding, but for Liberals.
So the election isn't the election. The election, it's the party nomination that's the actual election. So if you win the UCP nomination, chances are you will
party. But yeah,
but you get sorry, yeah. We're talking federal, but provincial. Anyways, just that they went to a stronghold of the Liberal and got their person in, and then they're going to get elected because it always votes Liberal.
Yeah, and 2 days before the actual nomination happened, CSIS went to the Liberals and said, hey, this guy that's running and in this riding is a Chinese spy. So you should take him off the docket. And they're like, no, we're good. And then they went one further and they said they went to his team, and this was classified when this was shared with them, that this guy was a Chinese spy that they didn't want to have running as a member of parliament because of, the fact that he's a fucking spy. And so then the Liberals actually went and breached the top secret confidentiality of this disclosure and went to his team and said, hey, so just so you're aware, CSIS knows that this guy's a spy and they're on to you guys. Which is just, that's the part out of the whole thing that flummoxed me was, okay, yeah, sure, fair enough. China's trying to meddle in foreign elections. We get that. The Liberals don't care as long as they win. We get that. But the fact that they didn't just turn a blind eye, they actively breached security to give this guy a heads up that CSIS was onto him as being a Chinese spy, and then went ahead with the nomination process anyway.
Yeah, one of the lines in the article said in late September, about 48 hours before the federal election nomination deadline, CSIS urged Trudeau's team to rescind Dong's candidacy, a national security official said. So they and then if you go watch the video of Trudeau talking about it, which we did, in 2022 he's saying I never knew. 2023 saying we always knew. It's just like another Oh man, some people think it's the nail in the
Lies and
coffin.
lies and
Yeah,
lies. But here's the thing is with any respectable politician, this would be career ending. With I mean, I get the fact that respectable politician's a bit of a contradiction,
it
but
is.
just you think like how numb we've become to this stuff. Like when we were wondering whether or not we should cover $93,000 worth of basically money laundering in conflict of interest issues. Well, that's not really that big news when we're talking about the Liberals. And this is, I would say, single-handedly the biggest, most damning thing that has been uncovered for the Liberals to date. Hands down, CBC isn't covering it. It's all
Uh,
coming from the Globe and Mail and Global, which is interesting because they're, Global is looking for more media bailouts right now. And so but it's too big of a story. It's such a big story that they can't not cover it once they got wind of it. And like this, if this doesn't bury him, what will? Fair enough. But honestly, at this point, you've got people voting for him in the GTA who have demonstrated unequivocally that they do not give a shit about what this guy does and stands for, which is nothing and nothing. They just want to have their guy win. They've sold their soul every time they voted.
yeah, I agree. Another tragic COVID death. Interesting title for this week. The grisly scene where a top Bill Clinton advisor was found hanged from a tree with a gunshot wound to his chest has finally been revealed 9 months after he died. Uh, the sheriff's report into Mark Middleton's mysterious death raises more questions than answers, as it ruled he died by suicide despite no sign of the weapon that killed him. Middleton was Bill Clinton's special advisor who admitted Jeffrey Epstein to the White House on 7 of at least the 17 times he visited that location.
Yeah. So this guy was tied to a tree and shot in the chest with a shotgun. And there was no gun found on the scene. And it's been ruled a suicide.
How much money do you think the cops got paid to write out to be like, it's suicide? This will go away.
It's probably not so much money as it comes down from the top that you're going to rule this as a suicide. And so when you say how much money did they get? Well, it's their job. It's their livelihood. You're going to write this down as a suicide because I'm telling you to write this down as a suicide. And that's like it just how much worse can it possibly get? Like, do you think a bear just came in and did it? Just all jacked up on cocaine or something, shot him in the chest because bears have opposable thumbs now, and then just ran away with the gun or ate it. Like, this is just, they're not even trying anymore. Not even trying.
Oh, it's just playing, or maybe we're just paying attention to is for like at least for me, it's just like I'm paying attention now. It's like, oh man, here's another one of those headlines where you're kind of like, hoofda. And I should warn the audience that kids are in the building, and one has just walked. Chicky, I'm in the middle of a show. Can I deal with you afterwards? Okay. Well, that went well. I thought I was going to have something different on my hands, and Twos can't even make fun of it this morning. Here we go. Polivier rolls over and shows his belly. There are a ton of people wound up about this.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say that this has been interesting to this has been interesting. Okay. I don't even know if we got to the end of everything else. Kids walking in really screwed me up. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre denounced a German politician after several Tory MPs were criticized for meeting her while she was in Canada this week. Conservative MPs Dean Allison, Colin Carey, and of course Leslyn Lewis were photographed having dinner with Christine Anderson, a member of the European Parliament. And we might all recall her comments on Trudeau. What was a year ago, maybe a little less. In a written statement responding to concerns Friday, Poilievre said Anderson's views are vile, that her racist, hateful views are not welcome here. The MPs were not aware of this visiting member of the European Parliament's opinion, and they regret meeting with her. Frankly, it would have been better if Anderson never visited Canada in the first place, the statement said. Okay.
What vile racist opinions does she have?
Well, they're trying to.
Well, no. That's it. Like, before you go
Yeah.
anywhere with this, the question is show us your notes, show us your work. Okay, she's vile, she's racist. Like, if she's an anti-Semite in Germany, that's illegal. She would go to jail for that. They're kind of sensitive about this thing after, prior events. Right. So just the fact that they're saying all this stuff, you're like, okay, well, just can somebody please point it out to me? And that was basically what Twitter had to say. Was there was just dozens of comments saying, well, what specifically has she said? Can you guys give me some perspective on this? Prove it. And then you've got there's a couple circle jerk articles that just kind of quote people um who make generic statements, and
Yes.
then it goes back
Quote,
three
no,
layers. Yeah.
they quote the headline of the article, but don't
Yeah.
actually quote the meat of the article, which actually talks about things that actually make sense.
Yeah. Like when the leader of that party said that the Holocaust was bird shit, which isn't really like you're not downplaying it. You're saying it's bad, right? But that's somehow is normalizing it is the argument. And you're like, well, no, that's not what was said at all. And it's really interesting whenever you see stuff like this, like just the fact that Polyev didn't even bother to look into it. He could have actually had a decent win. Like Leslyn Lewis pushed back and was just like, no, listen, I am not going to be called racist by a guy who wears blackface. And Trudeau had this long idiot monologue about how, this has just happened so many times. And you have to wonder, are they going to denounce this and get these people out of their party? Or are they going to actually admit that there is room for these ideas in their party? You know who they should have asked about this was Ahmed Hussein.
This may be right.
Yep.
I mean,
Ahmed Hussein was the guy who just hired Laith Marouf.
sorry, and I should finish my thought on, if you're not watching, it's a picture of Leslyn Lewis and then Trudeau dressed up as blackface.
One
And
of the many pictures of Trudeau best dressed up as
yes,
blackface.
and she said the PM wore blackface, denigrating black people, throws minority women under the bus. Now he suggests I'm racist for meeting with a sitting EU MP. That's the quote from Leslyn Lewis, and I would just like to say this: she raises in my books every step of the way she goes. Like
that was really well done.
Yes, it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is just if you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. And Trudeau calling out people for just being like, oh, their excuses that they didn't know about it, and their excuses that they didn't know about it. How many times is this going to happen? How many times has it happened with you, you dipshit?
You made me choke on my coffee. Oh man. Liberal pot calls Google kettle black. Okay. Earlier this week, the Canadian press reported that Google was blocking news stories from showing up in some people's search results and its Discover feature on Android devices. The company said the test affected fewer than 4% of Canadian users and would last about 5 weeks.
Mhm.
Quoted, we're briefly testing potential product responses to Bill C-18 that impact a very small percentage of Canadian users, a company spokesperson said. Bill C-18, for those uninformed, the Online News Act would force Google and Facebook's parent company, Meta, to share revenue with Canadian news publishers and broadcasters for the news articles that appear on the tech platforms. That revenue could fund nearly a third of the news content creation in Canada, is what it quoted. And it really surprises me that Google, this is once again another quote from Trudeau, it really surprises me that Google has decided that they'd rather prevent Canadians from accessing news than actually paying journalists for the work they do. I think that that's a terrible mistake, and I know Canadians expect journalists to be well paid for the work they do, Trudeau said.
For the work they do, they fucking suck in this country for the most part. All the mainstream ones for sure, right? And it's just so the idea is that they're passing a law in Canada to just pass the buck on who's going to bail out the media. And so rather than the government bailing them out directly, they're saying that whenever you Google any kind of a news item and then you click on the article that shows up, every time that happens, Google has to send whoever wrote that article a little bit of money. And it's going to add up to hundreds of millions of dollars, which is baffling because I can't believe there's that many news articles in the mainstream media that get read. But that's what it is. And so it's rather than the government bailing them out, they're getting Google and Facebook and Twitter and anywhere else that you just aggregate news sites to do the bailing out for the government. And Google has said, we're not interested in doing this. This is stupid. Why should we pay? We are sending people to them. Why should we pay to send people to them so that they can make money? We are already facilitating the making of the money for these asshats. They didn't say asshats, but I'm sure they were thinking it. Why should they pay for that privilege? And so they're just saying, okay, well, you know what? If it's going to cost us money to link Canadian content in Canada, we'll just not do it. And here's, it's a tax. It's a tax that they for once take out the middleman. But here's the thing: with any tax, anytime you tax something, you're going to see less of it. And so if they're taxing Google for showing Canadian news articles, Google is going to do less of it. This is simple economics.
We're following the footsteps of Australia, because in there it talks about how Australia has already passed a law doing exactly this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be interesting to see where this finishes off, Tews.
Well, it's going to finish off with everybody in Canada on VPNs.
Smith gives a sweetheartish deal to leadership campaign manager. You know, I have to be. I was thinking about this week before we started. I don't know if we've really gone after the Conservatives that much in the Tuesday mashup in the first 43 weeks. But in week 44, it seems like Conservatives are coming across the hairs, which has been an interesting added touch to the mashup. Here it is. The Alberta government last November awarded a sole source 3-month contract worth $72,500 to a marketing agency where Premier Danielle Smith's former leadership campaign manager is part owner and executive producer. Government records show the contract.
Okay, just real quick. Are you saying that I have not been critical of Danielle Smith on this show?
No, that is not what I'm saying whatsoever. Okay. More that I would say the Liberals and NDP have given us more than enough ammo every single week, just over and over and over again, that the Conservatives kind of gets shuffled down. But here's Pierre Poilievre this week, rolling over. And now here's a story about Danielle Smith giving a deal to her campaign manager. That's all I'm saying. Back to back twos giving Danielle Smith an easy time. That is laughable.
I could be more difficult when it comes to her if you would prefer.
I'm letting twos do twos. Anyways, the contract, which ran from November 1st, 2022 to January 31st of this year, was awarded to an Edmonton-based Nordic Media to provide digital media strategic planning and assess asset development. Nordic Media executive producer is Matthew Alltime, who was campaign manager for Smith when she sought leadership of the United Conservative Party. He is described as part owner of Nordic Media on its site. And then in quotes, we know what happens when you sole source. Taxpayers get ripped off. There's just no way for you to have the competitive tensions that keeps prices down if you only have one provider, she was quoted as saying during her time as the Wild Rose leader.
Yes. So, this one's mucky. So they got away from putting this out for bid because there's a clause in there where if you need something done really quickly, you can just award a sole source contract, right? And so Danielle Smith ran a really good campaign when she was running for leadership of the UCP. I think that's really fair to say. So this guy obviously knows what he's doing, and he does it well. Okay. Now, and then they said, okay, but here's where it gets tricky. The reason why it's so timely, even if it doesn't say it explicitly, is because they need to hit the ground running because they're running up against the clock with the election coming up really soon. And they need to come out guns blazing and showing exactly how capable they are compared to the NDP, which is probably going to be really easy to do. But that's essentially, whether they'll admit it or not, that's why it's so timely. So you've got a partisan issue for citing this clause that awards a sole source contract, right? So technically, did they do it correctly and follow the letter of the law? Yes. Do the laws suck? Absolutely. because I don't care how much of a UCP fan you are,
They
you should
pretty
not
much
be able
just
to
did.
pull the strings.
We've been ragging on Trudeau and his cronies and the NDP and their cronies for doing exactly this. Have we not?
Now, yes, we have. Now, again, like, to be fair, this guy obviously is good at what he does, and so it isn't
Yeah,
just
but
cronyism.
twos, you might
But
be able to argue with every time we attack the liberals or the NDP that they could argue the same thing. Yeah, but they're great at their job. That's why we gave it to them, twos. That's why we gave them the
but here's where
$95,000.
mhm. To a bread company to do their social media marketing, right? That's a little bit funky, right? And
Fair.
this you
This
can
is
say, all right,
fair.
but now you say, okay, well, you know what? The reason why it didn't go to bid, whether he got it or not, um, he probably would have got it in an open bid because he has a track record of being very effective at this, right? But the reason why it's so timely is because the election's coming up and the UCP wants to win. So they're turning the screws and finding the loophole based on partisan issues. And that's where you're like, yes, it's technically correct, but it's greasy as fuck, Sean.
Hey, if we're going to harp on Trudeau saying all these different people for how they've done things, Notley, I'm sorry. Everybody comes in the crosshairs, and you know my thoughts on Smith, and I know your thoughts on Smith, and that's why it's funny if listeners don't know Two's thoughts on Danielle Smith walking the floor when she was Wild Rose. We'll do an hour in the middle of the next time we have a Festivus or whatever we're going to call the next one, and the Tuesday Smash Up. When we do that, we'll bring up Danielle.
I don't
all
think
over
that's
again.
going to be enough time.
It's always the last ones you think. A Canada-wide warrant has been issued by Ontario Provincial Police for a 31-year-old man known to frequent the Toronto area after he allegedly breached his conditions while serving a 2-year arson sentence. He kind of looks like El Diablo from the Suicide Squad. Like he looks like the
Kinda?
pyro. No, okay, he does. Okay, let's see if I. Anyways, you
Bring it up.
I'm looking for it right now.
Okay, so in the meantime, this dude has fire tattooed all over his face, and for some reason, he's an arsonist. And like, just the coincidences keep piling up here, folks. And so this guy was on a 2-year. He had release conditions. So they basically just let him out and said you need to stay within a certain area. And one of the release conditions in Canada, believe it or not, is that you're not allowed to break the law. They specifically put in the release conditions of getting out of jail that you'll go back to jail if you break the law again, which is just
Which is,
classic
I mean,
Canada.
yeah, I mean, literally, you can't make this up. And this is, yeah,
This is a guy
this is the guy.
who, for some reason, decided to commit arson. And so if you see this man, get to the nearest fire extinguisher.
For cripe's sake. That's just a little humor added into the middle of this sucker that is just too
No,
good.
this is very real. I feel like this is the kind of guy who would probably burn something else down again given the chance, and we should be wary about it.
Oh God. Man kills armed home intruder. Judicial hilarity ensues. We've been talking about this on the show. Like every fifth episode, it seems it comes back full circle. It was just after 5 a.m. on Sunday when a group of men allegedly broke into a house where Ali Mean, a 22-year-old resident of Milton, Ontario, lives, according to police. Mean, through his lawyer, alleges the men who broke in, one of whom since been charged with unauthorized possession of a firearm, attacked his mother. It was then that Mean allegedly shot one of them. Police say there were multiple gunshots fired within the home, and one of the men who entered the home died. Mean was charged with second-degree murder and is now awaiting trial. The high-profile invasions and subsequent deaths, I mean, because this isn't the first one, have prompted questions about what force Canadians can legally use when someone invades their home. This is so this is what the lawyers said about if somebody invades your home. So it is
with a gun.
So it is something that the court has to negate and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That it fails on any one of these three steps, either there wasn't a reasonable fear of death or grievous bodily harm, or the force used wasn't for the purpose of defending themselves, or the force used wasn't reasonable. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that one of these things is missing at least one of these things, and that would mean that you're guilty of second degree. Well, in this case, he'd be guilty of second
Second-degree
degree
murder.
murder.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So you'll notice that only one of the two people who broke into the place was charged with any counts of anything, and that's because the other one's fucking dead. Okay,
Yes.
and there was multiple gunshots fired at the residence, despite the fact that the guy who killed the other dude only fired once. Which, I mean, you can't fire less than once while still firing something. So in terms of excessive force, I think that kind of rules it out. And so if there's a gunfight in your house and you fire one shot that stops it, I would say it's fair to say that you met a lot of legal minimums there, especially considering the fact that supposedly in one of the articles, one of the dudes was trying to attack his mom, and he was a legal gun owner, the guy who's defending his home. And so
you just wonder why they don't just put in I know there will be problems that arise somehow, with putting in just cleaning this law like right up. They keep trying to define what reasonable force is and things like that. It's like, well, listen, if you're breaking into somebody's house, reasonable force is get the fuck out.
yeah,
Like, I mean,
you want to hear a funny story?
sure.
Okay, so this guy I used to work with back when he was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, something like that. And he was one of those, he was a big dude. He probably still is. I've lost touch with him. But he was a big dude back then, he says too, right? And he had a baseball bat in his room and he lived in the basement. And so, anyway, one night he's just lying in bed and the window to the basement was right over top of his bed. And he hears someone trying to get in. And so, his room's dark because it's nighttime. And so he gets up and he goes and he grabs the baseball bat from the corner and he just waits by the bed. Sure enough, a couple minutes later, some dude just like drops down onto his bed and he just wails on him with the baseball bat, just like beats the ever loving piss out of this bastard. And then his dad comes down. He's like, "What the fuck is going on down here?" He's like, "This dude just broke in." And he's just lying there in a bloody pulp kind of thing, right? I mean, he didn't get like, it wasn't life threatening or anything like that. He was getting beat up by a 10-year-old, but that 10-year-old worked him over pretty good. So dude's dad calls the cops. Cops come over and they're like, "Well, do you want to press charges?" And the dad's like, "Well, I think he's kind of learned his lesson." And then the cops looked at the dude and he's like, "Well, you could technically press charges against this 10-year-old for assaulting you. Is that something that you want to do?" And the dude was so ashamed. He was like, No, just take me to the hospital. That was that.
Story time with twos. Oh man. How about this one? Reviews with twos. Cocaine Bear. Um, Here, I'm gonna bring it up because I don't even know. I actually watched the video of the movie trailer for this,
Mhm.
uh, which looks pretty like gruesome and hilarious all at the same time. But here's the picture. It says this is Elizabeth Banks. She said, "We're proud to say that we've awarded." This is PETA. "We're proud to say that we've awarded Elizabeth Banks and Cocaine Bear the very best award because she stayed true to her word by using CGI to create a hyper realistic bear instead of exploiting a real one."
I
And
just
then
think this is just stunning and brave, and I'm so proud of Elizabeth Banks for using a CGI bear in this movie rather than training an actual bear to rip lines of cocaine.
you realize this is based. I mean, like on a side note, you realize this is based on a
Based
true
on a
story.
true story.
I wonder how much of based it actually happened, but
Well,
y-
there
y-
was no attack or anything like that. Basically, what happened was in the 80s, some dude was trying to jettison a bunch of cocaine out of his plane. He threw a bunch out into the wilderness, and then he tried to jump out with some of it strapped to his back, and he didn't he stuck the landing a little bit too well. on somebody's driveway. And so, anyway, and then it's realized a little bit later that a grizzly bear had found, I think it was a grizzly bear in real life, but it was a black bear in the movie, had found this bag of cocaine, ripped it up, eaten it all, and then died an hour later. And so, anyway, the movie is like, well, what if that bear just really liked cocaine and went on a murder spree? And so it's funny because, like, there's this one guy that's dusted up with cocaine because he accidentally fell into it while they were running through the woods, and then the bear's like, and goes after him, and it was a whole lot of almost funny moments, and it was really, I felt like if they had somebody who wasn't like, it's a fun idea, and if you just gave it to somebody who wasn't an idiot to write it, it could have been a lot better. Like they had the guy from, they had the senator from The Wire, the governor from The Wire, I can't remember which, that big black dude who's always like, shit. He plays a cop and he says shit twice in the movie, but he never says shit. And you think like, this is
you've watched this?
Dude, look at the bottom of the screen, Sean. It's review with twos, Cocaine Bear.
No shit. I didn't realize you watched it. I just watched the trailer. I was like, oh man, this looks, I'm going to have to go watch this. But you actually watched it. So it wasn't a good movie at all then.
It had a few redeeming points. I would watch it when it came out on Netflix or Prime or Crave, but I wouldn't go to the theater to watch it, having already done.
Well, I mean, it's called Cocaine Bear. I'm not dragging myself to, like, you know.
Yeah, it's not going to be up for
somewhere somebody's you know, they're like, oh man, we're gonna smoke a big bowl and go watch this because maybe then it'd be great. I have
you
no
know
idea.
What actually. Probably if you were jacked up on a whole bunch of the marijuanas, it might be fairly funny, but it doesn't totally stand on its own. Like I said, it's got a few funny parts to it.
It's a killer bear.
It's interesting, and there's a couple fun ways that people die that I totally want to talk about, but definitely aren't going to spoil. And then there was just a lot of missed opportunities, right?
Curling Rock's bureaucracy does not. Man, this one will be, anyway, whatever. The fate of helmetless curling rests with Alberta Court of King's bench, according to Blacklock's reporter. The risk, here's quoted, the risk in the present case was the ice was slippery and could cause students to fall and become injured, said Alberta Court of King's bench Justice Colin Feasby in a ruling. You know helmets are coming to curling for kids. There's no way. There's just no way that this doesn't happen. We're going to have, in order for a class to go on the ice, they're going to be wearing helmets. It's almost laughable that it's lasted this long, twos.
At the same time, do you really need to make a rule for this?
No, you do not. But this is what's going to happen. Like in our society today, this is what's coming.
Here's the thing is that, I mean, it's called ice and it gets a little slick. This is not news to anybody who lives in Canada, right? And so you say, okay, well, you're curling. You're going to go out on that ice. Okay. Is it slippery? Yes, it's extra slippery. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, they pebble the ice to make it extra slippery so that it's even more slippery than regular ice. And now you're going to go out on there and on one of your feet, you're going to put this thing that makes your foot extra slippery so that you only have traction with one of your feet.
I hear you.
Is there any risk involved?
I hear you.
Somebody unfamiliar with this. Like this is.
I hear you, but it doesn't matter. In the world we live today, there's no way this isn't coming for at least students. You know, and then, you know, what'll probably happen is they'll make some cool little helmet that you can wear while curling and people will adopt it and whatever else, because that's the way the world's going. Curling, and saying that, as I backstep a second, I'm like, they're old school though. And
like if you
maybe they get away from it longer.
Wear a helmet, but
I agree.
Does not need to be a rule. This is not something that
I am agreeing with you 100%, but they will make a rule that will require.
Just get out of our lives. Curling is the one last beautiful thing in this country, and you're trying to fuck it up with bureaucracy.
I'm not trying to do anything. They're going to do this. I'm read this, and I'm
talking about you, Sean. You're doing this.
I just know it's coming. It's a sad day, honestly. Leave curling alone. I agree with you 100%. but it's a sad day. They're coming. Here we go. The NDP are not a serious party. The 44th edition. On Saturday we learned. Okay, there's a couple different parts to this, but here's the story. On Saturday, we learned the UCP will cut funding to the Good Samaritan Society Southgate Care Center, leading to the closure of 76 long-term care beds and 44 staff layoffs at the facility. Their cuts, so long-term care, will exacerbate the ongoing healthcare crisis.
So this is Lori Sigurdsson,
yes,
who was a former minister during that brief hellish moment where the NDP were in charge, and she's still an MLA. And so she goes on with this long thread, just pulling at heartstrings about how incredibly terrible it is that they're cutting funding.
Yes, and this is what she's saying, right? And so the 77 here's okay. So this is what she puts out. The NDP's all this is terrible. The UCP is destroying healthcare, and they're gonna leave us all whatever. The 77 spaces, which were second beds in semi-private rooms. So what they did was the 77 beds there was 2 beds in a room. They pulled one out. Now you have 1 bed in a room. Won't be reopened, meaning the facility will have 149 beds rather than the previous 226. The union raised alarms late last week, saying this means a loss of 44 jobs by March 30th, with 36 of those being AUPE member roles. That's Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. That's Alberta's largest union, for those wondering. And then it went on to say, Alberta Health Services spokesman Kerry Williamson said, since the beds have been vacant for 2 years, the closure is not expected to impact client placements from acute care. So they're making a huge, giant issue here.
Mm-hmm. We've been paying 44 people's entire paycheck for the past 2 years to look after empty beds. And the NDP are mad because they're closing, because it's cutting funding.
Correct.
And just classic NDP, either they don't know because they're too stupid, or they count on the people who support them to not know, assuming that they're stupid, which might be a fair argument, to not actually bother to go look into it and find out that, oh shit, we've been paying 44 people's wages for 2 years to look after empty fucking beds.
Correct. That is correct. So if you just read her thing, you go, your heartstrings get pulled. Not that lots of us don't do a little.
Well, what are the details? What are the actual facts
That's right.
associated with this? And that's where, if Danielle and her sweetheart campaign manager want to get their, if they really want to start sticking to the NDP, they just got to look for details like this, because they're everywhere. Like, remember when Rachel Notley campaigned?
Are you trying to insist that maybe they should give us the $75,000 and we could do it for them too? Just like
no, I wouldn't be able to do something like that as well as he did, and I'm way better at that kind of stuff than you are. So that's.
All right.
We like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind.
Yes.
More inclusive.
There we go. Exactly. Yes, thank you.
And the budget will balance itself.
Man, you are one pathetic loser. No offense.
Man, you were one pathetic loser. I wasn't sure where you wanted to stick this today. I picked this one. The gravy train never stops for former head of CBC, and this is why I chose it, okay? The CBC's former head got a hefty raise even though he left the public broadcaster 5 years ago, according to Blacklock's reporter. Cabinet recently awarded Hubert Lacroix a retroactive 10.3 pay raise, even though he was already the highest paid executive in the CBC's history. And this is where Trudeau comes in. The $44,000 raise was recommended by the Prime Minister, according to cabinet records. Mm-hmm. Blacklock's reporter said he left the CBC in 2018, earning $428,000 annually. The cabinet ordered a retroactively raised pay to $472,000 per year. This is the guy who lost
Hockey Night in
Canada.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, the fact that he sucks is kind of a side note on this.
Side note.
There's 2 big things to take away from this. When the hell has anybody ever just gotten a call from a company that they haven't worked at for 5 years and said, "Oh yeah, we decided we didn't pay you enough, so here's $50,000." Like, hey, remember that time you worked for us back when corduroy pants were a thing? Yeah, we kind of feel bad about not paying you more. despite the fact that you were the highest paid person ever to work at the company, we feel like it still wasn't enough. And so we're just going to top it up a little bit. 5 years later. The other thing is that CBC, despite the fact that they're supposedly completely neutral in all this and they run their own day-to-day affairs and they're not answerable to the prime minister or the PMO or the legislature in any way, parliament in any way, they still, on the recommendation of the prime minister, did this.
You know how stupid that is? Like, it's beyond stupid, too. It's beyond.
Oh, it absolutely is.
I would love to get that call. And here's $50,000 for you. I wonder what the heck he's getting. Like, what does he know that he's getting a retroactive pay raise? That Trudeau's like, here, we'll just give you a little bit more money. All right, is that fine? Are you good?
I imagine that he's probably been privy to the just completely dysfunctional day-to-day goings on of the CBC. But yeah, I mean, it'd be great if it happened to us. Like, imagine 4.5 years from now, Prime Minister Leslyn Lewis calls up AMC Electrical and says, you know what? You should pay the Tuesday Mashup even more money than you did. And then he says, okay, here's $50,000. Like this, it doesn't happen in real life. It only happens in government, and it only happens in government corporations. And every time another thing like this happens, it's just more proof positive that nothing they do is what they say it is.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I couldn't agree more. The sky is the limit. Here's an interesting one. Chris Sky, I fully intend to run for mayor of Toronto. Sky told a crowd of a few hundred in a video posted on his Twitter. Toronto is the crown jewel in this whole scheme of World Economic Forum and the United Nations, and the mayor that will stop that 15-minute city agenda, a mayor that will stop that personal carbon allowance, a mayor that'll stop sending billions and billions of dollars to other places where it is not needed. Any chance he can win that?
No.
Like, not a chance, right?
No, it's interesting because he's coming in as just an absolute dark horse. He's trying to be the Donald Trump of this election. Fair enough, I can appreciate that. But Donald Trump had bazillions of dollars to work his campaign from, and he actually, despite the fact that he's stupidly loaded, he's actually somewhat of a man of the people. I mean, you saw that in East Palestine here last week, right? And Chris Sky, yes, he says a lot of the right things, but he looks like a complete asshole every time he opens his mouth.
John Tory
loses a lot of people because of that.
Just for background information, this is what he'd have to do to win, okay? Well, and I guess he wouldn't have to get this much, but you kind of get the idea. Obviously, John Tory, who we talked about having the affair with the staffer last week, in the last election, was the popular vote at 342,000 people voted for him. And then the guy who got second had 98,000. Just to give numbers to it. Because it's like, can he get a bunch of votes? Oh, I'm sure he can. But can he get 340,000 votes against the establishment? I don't know about that.
Like I said, he makes a lot of good points, but he can't help but sound like a complete dickhole every time he talks. And if he could tone that down, maybe it might be a little bit different, right? But
did you see the video on a side note of Chris Sky berating the Edmonton city planner?
No.
Oh, you haven't seen that? Where he just hammers them on the 15-minute city thing over and over again?
Well, that's his kind of big point here. And it's funny, like there's been CTV just released an article this morning about how it's just the latest conspiracy theory. And my local newspaper ran an article about how 15-minute cities are a conspiracy theory. And here's the thing, in Oxford, where they're trying to roll this out, and that's what CTV talks about the whole time, and this is like, the big kicking off point for all this stuff is what's going on at Oxford. They go through this whole thing, and it's not the idea that all your stuff's going to be found locally and that you can get where you're going on foot or on bicycle. It's the fact that you've only got a certain number of times a year that you're allowed to leave your zone, and then you get fined afterwards. That's the issue that people are having with it. And you've got this entire huge article that just ignores the elephant in the room, which is just classic It's weird.
It's
At what
classic.
point,
The last like 5-10 years.
Yeah. You're like, okay, but you addressed every point except for the one that I'm making, and then you called me a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. The thing I always point out is I've read the reason why people like when it comes to Edmonton, like in their proposal, it doesn't have any of that in it. So when you're harping on Edmonton, you have to be gauged at how you go about it because it doesn't say any of that in there. It doesn't say we're going to limit your travel. And the guy literally says that. And I actually agree with him. What in the document, it doesn't say that. I always say, but it opens the door to where
It
that eventually
absolutely
comes
does.
in
And
because that's what the 50-minute city is all about all across the world.
the
right?
pilot project for it, which is Oxford, England, specifically has that built into it.
Yes, it does.
So if you're going to model it after the pilot project, it stands to reason that you would look at it and say, well, everyone's going to get mad at us because they've called this for the last couple of years and they've said it's coming down the pipeline. So what if we just eased it in a little bit? What if we just gently did it? Okay,
we
well,
need to reduce carbon. We need to do this.
Yeah, let's just do a little taste of it, and then we'll just add it all later, and we'll add it all later. Oh, there's not going to be QR codes. Oh, there's QR codes. Huh.
Yes, that is why everybody gets uppity. I still just go make sure you read the document so you can talk to it, right? Because just arguing against Oxford when Edmonton isn't Oxford,
yeah,
you have to be able to do right. Anyway,
it's the exact same playbook you saw with COVID, and they may as well call it 15 minutes to flatten the curve.
Happy news. Let's do some happy news before we get out of here today. And I've only been the kids have only come tap my shoulder a few times, so they've been wondering what the heck is going on. I think we've almost skirted through this. So here's some happy news for you, okay? 24 days adrift leaves man with lots to catch up on. Heinz is trying to track down. This is a cool part of the story. And actually, well, I'll read it and then I'll bring up the picture. Heinz is trying to track down the man who survived for nearly a month at sea on nothing but ketchup. That's last month. The Colombian Navy rescued a sailor 120 nautical miles northwest of Puerto Bolivar in the Guajan Department of Colombia. The Naval Institution had received information about a sailboat with the word help engraved on its hull. The sailor, identified as a 47-year-old Elvis Francois, said that his ordeal began in December when current swept the sailboat out to sea while he was making repairs off the island of St. Martin in the Netherlands of Antilles. Francois, who is originally from the island nation of Dominica, claimed to have survived 24 days adrift in the Caribbean with nothing but ketchup and food seasonings. Here's what he said in quotes: "I had no food. It was just a bottle of ketchup that was on the boat, garlic powder, and Maggie. So I mixed it up with some water."
Yes, which, that would just be horrible. But he survived and he's fine. And now Heinz is trying to find him so that they can give him a free boat.
Yeah, help us find the boat guy. Or the ketchup boat guy.
I mean, I love it when capitalism and humanitarianism comes together and it makes for happy news. And you're just like, okay, well, they just want to do it because it's good PR. But they are still giving a guy a free boat.
100%. 100%. Well, twos, the double deuce times 2 out the door.
I'd say we knocked it out of the park fairly well.
For those who have been enjoying us live streaming on Monday nights, that'll be coming back next week. Lord willing, I think I'm back from holidays and I will not be traveling all bloody day. And certainly look forward to getting back to some live comments flowing in and seeing what people have to say. Either way, twos, thanks for working me into your busy schedule and making this work. It's been an interesting, it's been an interesting couple of mashups with me on the road. So
recording at all strange times and hours. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll catch up. We'll catch up to you on the 45th edition next week. Either way, until then, folks.
All right. We'll see you later, buddy.